Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with another CEO interview. Very interesting drone company that I met about 2 weeks ago, and it was a very compelling story. I was extremely impressed with the CEO and the CFO. The name of the company is Volatus Aerospace. The CEO is Glen Lynch. And the ticker symbol for US is VLTTF, I believe.
That's right? Correct.
Okay. Glenn, I want to thank you for coming in to do the interview. I think you guys are in a very compelling, I've been following the drone industry for a long time, and I just have never been able to come across a company that I felt could be a leader in the space. And it's very fragmented with a whole bunch of little players, right? At least in the US. And then you've got the big China player, but we'll get into all of that. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to just give me some background on you and how you got here, and then we can get into the meat and potatoes on the company itself.
Absolutely. Tim, first, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So my background's 40 years in aviation and aerospace. I'm a professional pilot by training. I have both Canadian and American airline transport licenses, and mostly spent most of my life in the business jet operations, maintenance, repair, and overhaul, and that sort of thing all over the world, small airline operations. I would say about 5 years ago, I got particularly interested in the drone space. And when we decided to kind of pop the hood and see what was going on, what we found was this industry rocketing out of kind of that nascent phase, tons of opportunities. I mean, basically, if you took a pen and started writing down all of the applications in the various industries, in almost any industry, you run out of ink before you ran out of paper, right? And but what was interesting, so the opportunity was huge. But what was interesting is it was being supported by two guys in a truck, right? It was an industry full of small business, and that's not to discount the capabilities of those small businesses. Some of them were and are tremendously capable, but they had limited resources. There was nobody with any national presence or international presence, no real players of any scale that we identified. And that's what we saw as the opportunity for Volatus Aerospace.
Okay. And then, so how long ago did you join Volatus?
So we actually only incorporated the company. We started working on it quite a bit before we incorporated a specific entity. But it was actually 2019 that Volatus was incorporated. And it's a company that experienced most of its growth, funny enough, through COVID. The company is very decentralized. We have executives literally all over North America, and a number right now in South America, including Bogota, Colombia, and Lima, Peru. But that's literally how the company grew.
Okay, and just so we can, you just kind of mentioned the fact that there are so many different use cases for drones, right? We've got cargo and delivery, you've got surveying, mapping, autonomous solutions, you've got surveillance, reconnaissance, inspection imaging, public safety there, and that's just right off the top right there, right?
Right.
And what you've done is acquired several different companies and brought them all together, right, under one house.
So we hired a bunch of subject matter experts early on in the various verticals in the industry, and basically through a combination of a few acquisitions and a very large and dedicated business development team. That's actually what drove the growth. So we've got activity in most sectors where drones are gaining traction today. I mean, we talk an awful lot about public safety right now, because public safety is a big push for us in 2022. It's an area where drones, the adoption rate on drones is accelerating rapidly. There's some really tremendous technologies there. It's obviously an area of, supporting public safety is just, it's good business, and frankly, it's the right thing to do as well. So we've put
when you're talking public safety, you're talking, police departments, fire departments, that type of thing.
Correct. So using drones as a first responder is really becoming a thing, right? You've got organizations like the Las Vegas Police Department, for example, that has a very significant drone program that's integrated into their law enforcement activities. But we've got fire departments that are using drones to be able to get out, basically be first eyes on a scene before the rigs even arrive, so that they've got situational awareness and have some idea what they're dealing with. But law enforcement, fire responders, emergency medical type applications, it's a huge area for us right now.
So when do they have to have when police department or the fire department, do they have to have their pilot's license? I mean, in order to.
They do.
They do.
And it's the case whether it's Canada or the United States. It's just so they're trained pilots. There are some capabilities that they can gain in the United States, or in the public safety area. They can gain some capabilities for drones that are beyond even what civilians can do under the current regulatory framework. So basically, law enforcement can obtain approvals at what they call a tactical COA to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight, and get around the other side of a building, or be able to get eyes on to critical situations. But they are licensed pilots. So from our standpoint, our solutions include the sale of equipment, helping with needs analysis. The sale of solutions, I would say, is probably better than equipment, because we integrate a whole bunch of things together, from command centers to software applications to you name it. And then ultimately provide the training. We can do the safety management activities. We can even help with maintenance. And then there are, in some cases, opportunities to operate drones in a supplemental way for emergency response services.
Okay, so when you and I first met, there was a specific license that you have, right? And it was, you're holding on to it for the future of freight delivery, I think is
correct,
right?
Yeah.
Can you give us a little background on that and what exactly that means?
So the key thing to understand is the majority of revenues in the drone space today have nothing to do with delivery. Delivery is not quite a thing yet on a commercial basis. And Volatus is an industrial commercial company with kind of a blue sky kicker. The cargo is long-term, really a blue sky kicker. But here's the way it works. So when you're collecting data and you're selling actionable intelligence products, whether those are raw data or actually processed data, there's no special license required from an economic standpoint. But the minute you carry a box that belongs to a third party, it becomes a commercial air service. So both in Canada and the United States, you require the operating authorities for the vessel that you're using. You require the appropriate crew training, the pilot licensing, and so on. And the last thing that you need is the operator needs to carry economic authorities in the form of licenses. In Canada, it's the Canadian Transportation Agency. In the United States, it's actually the Department of Transport. And basically, when Volatus went public, we did a strategic RTO. So the vehicle that we used, the target, was a company called PartnerJet, which had been in the conventional aircraft commercial operation business since about 1987. It was traded on the venture exchange as PJT. And That company, while it was kind of shrinking, it had a really healthy balance sheet and it had a really tremendous safety record. And for us, what we wanted were the economic authorities that company had. So the operating expertise, the safety management systems, and the economic authorities. So by doing an RTO with that company and basically getting rid of all of the kind of non-core business activities, we preserve the licenses by retaining a single aircraft, which we own, and it spends its life out doing charter. So everybody says, well, you own a jet. Well, it's pretty exciting. We're probably one of the few drone companies that actually does own a jet, but we don't use it as a corporate airplane. It's a revenue tool. But what that does is it provides us the infrastructure to operate the airplane you just brought up. So we're able to do drone delivery using the smaller drones you showed earlier. But coming in 2025, we have a purchase to delivery slot from a San Diego-based company called Nautilus. Really tremendous piece of technology. And basically, to give you an idea, that's a 19,000-pound airplane that carries about, if I remember right, about 8,600 pounds of cargo. And it reduces the cost of freight by more than half and reduces the carbon footprint by about 50%. It's a very
this could either be a piloted or an autonomous vehicle, correct?
So it flies autonomously, but by definition, it's a remotely piloted aircraft. So this, while it's a drone by definition, in actual fact, it's remotely piloted, much in the same way that, let's say, a Reaper or a Predator is flown. So it will be, by the time they're finished their certification path, it will actually be a certified unmanned aircraft. So it flies in the same airspace under the same rules as say our business jet does. But bearing in mind that now you're carrying palletized cargo, you can roll containers right out of the belly of a 767 or an Airbus and put 10 of them inside of this aircraft and transport it to another location. But with the cost reduction and the reduction in the carbon footprint, we really believe it's going to be a disruptive technology. And if I remember right, the company has about $6 billion in expression of interest from airlines right now that are interested in the product. And from our standpoint, we're positioning PartnerJet, which has been rebranded Volatus Aviation. We're positioning it to be an operator of that class of airplanes. So the aviation business within the Volatus Aerospace group is focused on moving towards unmanned cargo. That's the stake in the ground for 2025. We've been following it for a couple of years, so it was a strategic move. And in actual fact, Volatus purchased the very first production slot. So we take delivery of the very first airplane in 2025.
Okay, so you guys are the very first customer that they deliver a plane to.
Correct. And our ultimate objective is to position ourselves, not just being able to operate it as let's say, a charter carrier, but also much of the airline business in, let's say, the regional airline basis is done in what they call a capacity air carrier model, which means that, like, for example, when you fly Delta Airlines, you might end up being on a flight that's operated by Endeavor, or by, you fly United Airlines, you could be GoJet. Their branded delivery is United, but the actual operator is a separate company. And we're positioning ourselves to potentially be that operator of the unmanned systems. Yep.
Yep. That makes great sense. Okay. So, I mean, I'm just pulling stuff up here as we're cruising along so that people can get an idea of just how comprehensive the company is. Let's talk. When we met last week, you have made a recent investment in Delta. I think it was Delta Drones. Is that right?
Delta Drone. Yeah. So we're not quite at the investment phase right now. I mean, we've announced the definitive agreement. We're going through the due diligence process with them right now. It's a fairly strategic acquisition. Because it gives us a presence on 5 continents, and it's quite complementary in terms of capabilities. Like, for example, that group has real strength in Australia and South Africa and also Ghana and the Ivory Coast in the mining industry. And while Volatus currently does a lot of mining activities, I would have to say that they're considerably stronger and more capable than we are in the mining sector. So, of course, that gives us the ability to translate or to import those strengths into Volatus Aerospace and leverage those strengths to grow in South America and in North America as well. You know, they're all, the big mining companies are all the same companies that are operating globally. On the flip side, we're very, very strong in public safety. We've got growing activities in agriculture and of course, cargo. We have some very unique aircraft currently operating in the cargo space for things. We use them in North America for like ship to shore, shore to ship, that sort of thing. They have no activities in cargo. And if you look at the units that we have, they're perfectly suited for operations in high temperature areas like the Northern Territories and Australia. Australia actually has a slightly different regulatory environment. So a lot of opportunities for synergies on all sides of the world as that comes together.
All right. So you've got these mobile command centers that are just out of this world, right? And then you've got a pilot network, right?
Yeah, about 1,200 pilots across the United States. And it's an interesting model. So Volatus as a company has about 80-ish full-time employees, give or take. And they're probably a little better than a third of them in business development and sales. Another third would be our leadership subject matter experts. And then we have, of course, normal administration and that sort of thing. But to be able to operate at scale, one of the companies we acquired last year was called Connexicor. And Connexicor operated a pilot network of almost 1,200 pilots across the United States. They'd spent several years building up this vetted network where they had good depth in an understanding of their equipment, their training, their capabilities. And over time, they developed an understanding of their expertise. So it gets a little bit like an Uber model. So when we've got contracts, let's say we've got an engineering company where we're doing an infrastructure bridge inspection. We've got one bridge in Los Angeles, one in New York, and one in Chicago. Or facade inspections, the same thing. We may be doing those in multiple locations all over the United States and Canada. In some cases, we're using our own permanent pilots, but in a lot of cases, we've got pilots that are geo-tagged in the area that are capable of doing them on our behalf, sometimes with their own equipment, sometimes Volatus will have to ship equipment down to them to be able to conduct operations on Connexicor's behalf. And that's basically how we developed that model. And of course, the beauty of it is we don't have the permanent burden of a large-scale pilot network, but we do have, because of the intimacy with the relationship with these operators, the ability to scale business very quickly and have very solid service delivery. And it delivers, I think we target a gross margin in that area of about 40%, and we're getting anywhere from 50 to 55% in the model. So it's a scalable model, and it's a very positive business activity for Volatus.
And you guys are also have the ability to license, right?
We do. So when you're in a nascent industry, one of the challenges that you have is there's no infrastructure. Like when I when I was in the business jet world, if I brought a new aircraft on board, there's a pool of pilots I can go out and hunt down. In the drone industry, it's really a different story. Like a lot of these licensing regulations are, single digit year olds, or not, there's not a real depth. So what we end up doing is conducting training, two types of training. There's the regulatory compliance, or let's call it the licensing, where the pilots become licensed under Part 107, or in Canada under Part 9. We'll train them to be able to operate legally and get their pilot certificates. The second thing that we do is we have technical training. Actually, I should just pause for a second and tell you, on the actual pilot training, we also run a bunch of other programs. So in early education, we have a product suite called Drones in the Classroom, headed by Matt Johnson in our team. And Drones in the Classroom is intended to introduce unmanned technologies into early education. We also do drone camps for schools and whatnot. So that's one end. The other end, we have a product headed up by a fellow retired colonel from the Canadian military, Michel Latouche. And Michel is, we're honored to have him, first of all, honored by his service, but secondly, just honored by the man. And the product that he heads up for us is called Task Force Drone. And that's specifically targeted at training or retraining veterans into the drone space. Because what you get awesome. With yeah, well, you know what? It's not just, again, the right thing to do, but I have to be honest with you. Veterans are very loyal, very disciplined, highly capable professionals. All we're doing is teaching them a new set of skills, and they tend to be real rock stars and, a dependable group to work with. So we're quite proud of that initiative. And then once they've got their licenses, no matter whether they're kind of our veteran program or our general program for commercial activities, we also have training that gets very specific. So if somebody is doing, let's say, windmill inspections or let's say precision agriculture work, we actually provide the training for them to be able to properly understand the sensors that they're operating, the data that they're collecting, and actually be able to conduct their missions.
That's awesome. I mean, just the whole spectrum of everything that you guys provide. I mean, it's from A to B. I mean, it's from A to Z, just about, right?
Well, it's, you know what, I remember early days when some of the investors were saying, well, are you an equipment sales company? Are you an operating company? Are you a training company? And the basic answer is yes, right? Because when you're in a nascent industry, you have to create the infrastructure. And so we believe largely, if I was coining kind of Warren Buffett, our economic moat is that training and human infrastructure combined with our technical knowledge of the industry at large and some of our IPs. I mean, we do own, I think on our balance sheet right now, we're a little shy of $4 million in IP that we actually own, but we're largely a technology agnostic company. Our goal is to develop the relationships with industry and ensure that the engineered solutions that we deliver to them are using the best technologies for the application they have. And by creating a stickiness with those customers, it allows us to grow with them. In some cases, it means that we're operating their drone program for them. In some cases, we're equipping them and training them to run their own program. And because technologies roll every 3 years, that's what Volatus considers the technology cycle to be. About every 3 years it rolls, right? There's new technologies, it's moving very quickly. But now there's an opportunity to continue to supply these customers. On the flip side, there's other customers, large engineering firms, that will buy drones, will train them to operate their drones. They'll do a percentage of their own, their requirements, they'll fill them on their own. But we have one engineering company in Canada, for example, they do probably 40% themselves and outsource 60% to Volatus, just based on size, sometimes complexity, because the difference is, their staff are not necessarily flying drones all the time. And we've got a group of people that's what they do, right? They understand all the sensors, all of the operating environments, and that's what they do.
No, it's fantastic. So let's I think we've got a pretty clear understanding that you guys have a wide spectrum of what it is that you're providing in the drone space, right? So as you're sitting here today, in the next 6 to 12 months, what do you want to see happen within the company that you feel like this was an incredibly successful year?
So I mean, we've released our revenue guidance for this year, so we're pedaling really hard to achieve that, and achieving that will be a major accomplishment on its own. If you look at our revenue base, 2 years ago, we were about pro forma 770,000. Last year, we've issued revenue guidance for last year. It's unaudited, although our results will be coming out soon. We did about 16.5 million last year, and our revenue guidance for this year is about 38 million. So a lot of growth activities happening there. I should pre-qualify that. I'm sitting in Canada, so I'm speaking in Canadian dollars, just to be clear.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, when you actually apply the conversion, it's a little less exciting, it's but still decent numbers in the drone space. So it's real revenues. But so we're entering the heaviest season for Volatus. In law enforcement and in most of the central and southern United States, there's a limited seasonality. But of course, in Canada, the seasonality is a big deal for us. Like trying to do agriculture in Manitoba in the middle of February, there's limited opportunities there. But once the agriculture season spools up, it's very active. Now, the type of things that we do in the winter are things like infrastructure inspections, and we do a lot of broadband telecommunication,
the towers, the cell towers, and wind farms, and any of that stuff.
That's year round. That's really year round. And as a matter of fact, on wind farms, we do them in Canada, the United States. We're doing them as far south as Chile. So we've got that's a relatively stable ongoing business. But there's no doubt that because we started in Canada, we've got a lot of activities in Canada. There's a seasonal influence in our revenue model. So we get into latter Q2 and into Q3. That's a lot of heavy lifting in terms of our drone services revenues. But we're also hoping that the regulations for beyond visual line of sight in Canada that were supposed to come into play last year, we're hoping they'll come into play this year. It just unlocks new use cases and better capabilities for the drone. Now, Volatus does have authority to conduct beyond visual line of sights in virtually every region across Canada, but it's all done under special flight authority. And in the United States, it's a little bit more complex. The conversation is certainly well underway with the regulators and with industry, but we've got a ways to go before, from a practical commercial standpoint, flight beyond visual line of sight is a real commercial reality.
Let me ask you about one thing we haven't really talked about: software component of like software as a service. Is there an opportunity there within the drone industry?
There is. So with us, we actually have, we're not a software company, just to be clear, although we do have some development projects that are quite specific in the agriculture area, more around helping us use drone technologies for more useful things like pest control and those sorts of practical exercises. But there's technologies out there with many of our business partners that we've literally scoured the world from, Israel to you name it, all over the place. And I'll give you an example. I bring up Israel because one of the products that we integrate with technologies a lot has the capability of operating many drones simultaneously and at large distances. So I had the experience of sitting in Tel Aviv and flying two drones remotely in Israel and a third drone north of Toronto, all at the same time, sitting in an office in Tel Aviv. Well, I can tell you now, if you show up at one of our trade shows in North America, we oftentimes demonstrate that. So from the trade show, as long as we're not inside of a metal building where we can't get connectivity, we'll actually demonstrate the ability in one of our command centers to fly a drone 1,000 miles away. And it's very, very effective at showing what the future potential is. Like, we're working on some cargo opportunities that are off, they're off of North America because of the regulatory challenges in cargo delivery in the United States, for example. But we can operate drones from our corporate office remotely. Could operate them down in the islands, South America. We could operate them in Australia if that was practical, totally remotely. So we're going to get from a situation of 1-to-1, one pilot, one drone, to many drones to one pilot relatively quickly. Again, even the regulations, the FAA is putting a lot of energy into this, as is Transport Canada, and other governments around the world, to figure out how to allow drones, or to unlock the potential of drones without compromising, flight safety with conventional aircraft and so on. It's not a new area. The technologies are quite far advanced. There's some real strong players in that space. Regulators are deeply engaged. The industry is talking sometimes at each other as much as with each other, but it's part of the process. And as that happens, the impact on the drone industry is just exponentially accelerated. The only reason we don't stress a lot of those things today is we try to differentiate ourselves by saying we're an industrial commercial play. We're looking to engage drones where they can be put to work today, right? Where the revenue exists today and in the immediate future.
Okay, let's talk about the company itself, the strength of the balance sheet, right? How many shares do you have outstanding, fully diluted, Glenn?
So fully diluted, I'd have to pull up that cap table real quick. We have about 100 million shares outstanding, and about 24 million of those are freely tradable right now. The company fully diluted is still had approximately, I don't have the cap table in front of me, so I'm rattling off memory, but it's a fairly familiar number. About 63% fully diluted is held by Volatus insiders. So the founders, myself and my original partner, and the management group within Volatus. So still a lot of skin in the game. And the insiders are currently locked up under the escrow conditions of the Toronto Stock Exchange, which doesn't really matter much because there's nobody in the company right now that's looking for a path out. Where we jumped into this for a purpose. And the purpose right now is to take advantage of the environment, this acceleration in the industry, and really position Volatus as a premier global player long term. So I think the opportunity is significant, and all of our stakeholders see it.
So let's talk about that acceleration. So, I'm not a warmonger, and I don't think I wouldn't believe that you are either. I think what's happening over there in Russia and Ukraine is absolutely terrible, horrendous. However, that has in the last probably month really accelerated. I mean, a lot, throughout the Cold War, many of these countries, European countries, have been cutting back on their defense spending for multiple years, right? And now with what's happening, I think you're seeing a huge increase in demand for drones right now, right?
Yeah, so my position, first of all, on the entire topic, I have a son that's a major in the Canadian Artillery, and I'm exceptionally proud of his service, but obviously it brings the entire subject really close to home. And we have, a fair number of veterans that are part of the Volatus Aerospace family, and super proud of them. But again, war is very near and dear, and frankly, it's almost a topic that I don't like to talk much about because I'd rather it didn't exist. But the reality is it does create a lot of economic activity for drones. I mean, I use an example. We delivered out of the blue, you get one phone call and you're shipping, $200,000 worth of thermal cameras to Poland, let's say. And well, you don't know exactly where they're going or what they're being used for. It doesn't take very long to figure that out. So there's a lot of demand right across the drone industry right now. Drones are very effective tools for surveillance, humanitarian applications, resupply applications, and we've got some very unique products in that space. The challenge to the drone industry for companies that have the financial resources, such as Volatus has, still a reasonable amount of cash on our balance sheet, and so we have the ability to take advantage of these opportunities. But a lot of the drone industry, as we mentioned earlier, are two guys in a truck, and that's true on the OEM side as well. They're small operations, great technologies, but all of a sudden they get these big demands. And
how do they fill them?
Well, the difficulty, it's almost the perfect storm. You've got this huge acceleration in the industry at the same time that the stock market's been in a bad mood. So a lot of these, especially really early revenue companies, no matter how good their technology is, it's very difficult for them to get their hands on capital right now. So,
And then they do what, Glenn? Sometimes they do the deal with the devil and they get that death spiral financing.
oh boy, you know what? Abby, our CFO, uses that term all the time. That death spiral financing, that highly dilutive funding, and that has. I mean, there are a number of drone companies that have engaged in that, and of course, it allows them to scale really quickly, but it'll take their cap table from something reasonable to something almost unmanageable pretty quickly. We obviously shy away from that type of product. We're quite sensitive about how we fund the company and making sure that we're representing our shareholder interests properly. At the same time, we're striving to take advantage of these opportunities with a lot of the smaller companies. But what ends up happening is, the drone industry economically is being stimulated like crazy, and it was already busy, right? The challenge is, again, the capital, which for companies like ours does create some real opportunity. And in some cases, we'll acquire inventory from these smaller OEMs because that's how they'll fund themselves. They'll sell a block to somebody like us. And of course, we're sitting with inventory on hand while a lot of companies are struggling to actually fill orders.
So I mean, small caps in general, not just drones, but small cap companies in general have been getting pounded for the last 10 months. I mean, it's the entire sector. And they actually, the small and mid cap and micro cap led, I mean, they were actually the indicator that the market was in trouble about 10 months ago. We had the big mega cap companies like the Teslas and the Microsofts, the Apples, the Nvidias that were holding up. Those were the pillars that were holding up the overall markets. And that was not, if you look at the charts of those mega cap companies, they're damn near parabolic in 12 months, right?
Yep.
That's not a sustainable trajectory that is going to continue for any extended period of time. And eventually, and that's why we have started to see this volatility now, because it went from the small caps, micro caps, and the mid caps up to the mega caps, and those things have such a huge weighting in the industry, in the indexes, that's why now we're seeing 400-point move down in the NASDAQ, right? So, and I don't necessarily feel as though that's over, especially when you've got the politicians in Congress and that now looking at the solution of being, let's raise taxes on the mega corporations and the ultra rich to solve our problems, which I think is just incredibly stupid, but we always seem to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. I don't know. As I look at you guys, you're in a good financial position. You've probably got a lot of companies out there that over the last 10 months have felt a lot of pain with their stock price. And there maybe 10 months ago or 11 months ago, when you might have engaged a conversation about an acquisition or a partnership or whatever, maybe back then they were feeling a little, yeah, you could buy us, but you're going to buy us for X multiple over our not existing earnings. But I would imagine
regretfully that resonates close to home with many of the stories that we've heard, for sure. Yeah.
But I would suggest that maybe now those conversations are much easier to have from your side than it is from their side. Maybe the reality has kind of hit them in the face, right?
Well, that most definitely. I mean, from our standpoint, we our primary focus is always growing organically. Even if you look at the companies we acquired last year, on average, and literally this is it's a stat that I've got right at my fingertip because I'm quite proud of it. Our service and training businesses grew 109% organically last year. So it remains, our primary focus is on that organic growth. But when you get to a certain size and a certain presence, what I've discovered is you can go fishing for opportunities by casting out in the water, which is what we had to do early on. And then you get to a certain point where you discover you can go out in the boat. You don't need your fishing rod because the fish jump into the boat.
You need a net.
We get hit fairly regularly with interesting companies that like where we are, like what we're doing. They want to be part of something bigger, and their expectations have been reset now to a more reasonable level. Many of them have great businesses, and they would be talented add-ons. I'm going to say a lot of these small companies, the acquisitions are more acqui-hires than acquisitions. I mean, it's why retaining all the leadership for us is so key. But definitely the opportunities to continue and consolidate this industry are significant. As it's tracking the same path that many industries have in the past, like automotive 40 or 50 years ago. It's the same sort of thing now.
Let's talk about Abby for a second here, and because I asked you a direct question when we first met about not necessarily coughing up cash, but using your stock as the incentive to get an acquisition done, right?
Yeah. So very lucky, that's when you offered me the opportunity to lead this in a certain way. I'm extremely proud of our CFO. He's not simply a financial administrator. He's a very unusual individual. Very proud to say this will embarrass him when he watches this, but he's recently been named one of the top 50 financial executives by the Globe and Mail. So that's going to be coming out very shortly. It actually has been announced, but they're going to do a bit of a promotion on it. So super proud of him. But what happens when Abby analyzes with his team and Luc Massé, who's our executive vice president, they focus on a lot of the M&A activities. So I find a company that's interesting. They have a look at it kind of completely detached to analyze the business and look at it and see whether all the metrics work and it falls within our model. And what we'll typically attempt to do is like a 1/3 cash, 1/3 equity, 1/3 earnout. And the earnout helps us bridge the differences. In M&A, the buyer wants to buy at the historic based on history. The seller wants to sell based on future opportunity. And an earnout mechanism actually allows us to satisfy both requirements. So we'll pay for what we bought, but we'll provide opportunity for what they promise. And then what's really cool is once they become part of Volatus, it's not their objective, it's ours. So we do everything we can to help them hit their earnout objectives. And to date, every single company leadership have achieved their earnout objectives because it's a win-win. Everybody wins. But Abby does a great job analyzing those companies and literally coming up with a proposal for a model, which oftentimes I get credit for, which is kind of cool. It's amazing thing about a CEO. You get credit for everything, even all the stuff you didn't do. But that's basically how it works internally.
No, that's fantastic, right? I think the other thing that's extremely important is when you do that, when you have that, you don't buy a company and then have the top performers of that company leave and go start another company, right? They become part of the family of Volatus, right?
So to date, this is a real point of pride for me and for the company. We've retained 100% of our leadership, and that's through. I've been involved in M&A, as has my associate Luc Massé for literally decades. So we've kind of figured out all the things you shouldn't do, because one of the most valuable assets in any company is the tribal knowledge of the leadership and the team. And we have a very, very, I would say our post-acquisition strategy is almost more important than our M&A strategy in itself. So we attempt to unlock the potential of companies without necessarily causing any hardship or change in direction to what they were originally doing. And the integration with Volatus tends to happen more naturally. So we focus on the things that they feel they need help with. Generally, we know what they are from the due diligence process. but it allows everybody to get really comfortable. And again, to date, 100% leadership retention, which is critical when you're growing at the speed that we are. And they're a pretty incredible team of people.
What's really, I think, really important about what you just said is that you don't go in there with both guns blazing, saying, okay, well, you guys used to do it this way, but now you're going to do it this way, right?
No, well,
you don't go in and try to fix what isn't broken. I mean, obviously,
I'm telling you, every company, every single company you buy, no matter whether they've got a sophisticated internal reporting system or a shoebox for their accounting, it doesn't matter. Every company has something to teach us, right? But you won't know that until you kind of allow yourself to become part of their family before they become part of yours. And don't try to teach them something, try to learn. And the process is not long, right? It's the minute you stop threatening people and upsetting all of the things that they've worked so hard to build, they start trusting you. And then the relationships start to form. You get that web of relationships. And sooner or later, you discover, like, I'll give you an example. Connexicor, Frank Segura, the CEO there, who's just a rock star. He had developed this system for managing this pilot network and basically for an entire workflow. Well, Volatus as a company was significantly larger, obviously, than the acquisition of Connexicor. But that system has now been rolled out throughout Volatus Aerospace because it was brilliant and well done. And you capitalize on these strengths. But first of all, you've got to walk in humbly, and you've got to allow yourself to become part of their family before they become part of yours.
I think there is a big shift happening because if you think back, you're old enough, I'm old enough. When acquisitions happen, what did we call that period? It was the honeymoon period. And then whatever the management team was actually, probably wound up being gone, right? I think there's a whole shift happening in business where people, companies are recognizing, hey, you bought this company for a reason. That there was obviously something they were doing that you liked and wanted a piece of. And then you come in and you let the people that built that walk. And that is just got to be one of the dumbest things on the planet in my mind, right?
I think you've got that exactly right. I mean, you hire an Olympic class runner and then you tie their shoelaces together. I mean, to me, I would say unleashing the potential of these people means realizing right off the bat that no matter how friendly you are during an acquisition process, the acquired company, the people, the human capital, which is the real essence of any company, right? You can buy assets, but people are critical. Well, they have no idea in their hearts, no matter how much they nod and smile and say, this is exciting, they really don't know if you're there to lead them or loot them. So the best thing to do is literally start out by allowing them to lead you, at least in their area. And when they start feeling respected and they start realizing that they are recognized for the things that they're exceptional at, it's amazing how open people become. And then the lines start to blur. In the old days, you'd buy 6 companies and you turn around and you say, you are blah, right? And here's how you're going to do it. And then, by the way, well, I don't really trust you, so I'm going to drop my guy into your company, and you break all the relationships. Well, if you handle it differently and you really focus on that trust and preservation of culture, everything else happens naturally. Our leadership, I would say, Volatus's real strength is in what would be a mid-level corporate leadership, but the senior leadership and the entities that we have in the Volatus Aerospace group. These are brilliant, motivated, largely millennials, although they're kind of all over the map from an age range, men, women, you name it, they're everywhere on the spectrum. But those are our best advocates. I mean, when you're buying a company or trying to buy a company, I can literally say, you want to do a bit of due diligence on Volatus, go online. We haven't announced everything we've done, but there's a lot of visibility there. pick a leader, pick a couple at random. Don't tell me who they are. Call them up. They're our best salespeople because they all believe in a cause, because quite frankly, they are Volatus, right? Without them, we're just a name. With them,
You're allowing them to do, I mean, look, you could, maybe they're very innovative, they're creative, they have, you know, they're software guys or hardware guys or whatever. Maybe they're not the best accountants or the best business, they don't have the best business acumen. So what, right? Let them focus on what their creativity, right? Let them focus on visioning, you know, the vision of the future, right? That's, you let people do what they do best, right?
unleash them. That's exactly
Unleash
what you do. Unleash them. And that's why those companies double in size, because we allow them to do what they originally wanted to do. And then you imagine that a company that's focused, let's say, on infrastructure inspection, and they have a big agriculture opportunity. Well, guess what? We have an ag specialist within the company. All of a sudden, they, you know, if it's agriculture, for example, they'll call up our ag specialist and he becomes part of their group at that point. And so it allows them to scale out their business well beyond what it was before. Frank, I use the example. Frank has got this, Connexicor does a lot of facade inspections. It's a huge area of business for us, a very specialized business. Well, you know what? We had an opportunity in Toronto. We had another one in Vancouver. So the guy in Toronto and the guy in Vancouver reach out to Frank. Frank becomes part of the team. We have a very agile management structure, and they're really driven by the opportunities. Well, you know, right off the bat, when you've got the guy that's never done the facade inspection before, he brings in the big gun. And now we've got, you know, we make sure that we both price it correctly, but also that we can execute that mission correctly, because the guy that's doing it is an expert. And we've got experts in all of those fields kind of all over the company.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Listen, I've taken up a lot of your time. I want to talk. This is the I for some reason I can't pull up on this software program that I use. I can't pull up VLTTF, but this is the symbol of the stock in Canada, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you know, I've told you, I think when we first met, I was never a technical guy. I was always a fundamental guy. And then I took a course like 15 years ago, and now it's the first thing I look at. But what I like to do is I like to try and combine, you know, a good technical setup with a good fundamental story. And if you can do that, your returns can be way above average, right? And as I'm looking at this company, okay, so help me understand, was this an actual IPO or was this a reverse merger? What was this?
Yeah, this was a reverse merger. So it was an RTO. So that's why you've got that funny little blip at the very beginning of the stock, right? As everything comes together and whatnot. The company went public at 65 cents.
Okay.
That was the go public price.
Okay, so 65 cents Canadian, right?
65 cents Canadian. If you look at OTCQB, which is what you were looking for there a minute ago, that's been active now for, I'm guessing, about a month.
Okay.
So once you go public, it takes a few weeks after that to get the registration process complete. It is complete, and we are now trading under VLTTF as well.
Right.
But what you're seeing there is it begins at a 65 cent stock. January the 4th was our go public date. That was our first day of trading.
Okay. And so right now, this is you don't have a whole lot of historical data, right? Because you just did it. So, but what it looks like to me, and actually yesterday, was it yesterday? Yesterday, or is this, or is that today? Hold on a second. No, that was yesterday. Okay. You essentially came down and tested. This is what technical guys would call a double bottom test, right? What's interesting about it is you came down, you could see how this wick came down, tested this low. By the end of the day, it closed back up here, right? That's actually kind of a bullish indicator from just a single candle perspective. But, you know, this trades very thin. So this is actually, what does this trade on average per day? Right around
So it's actually, I mean, I can tell you the running average right now is about 50,000 shares a day.
About
Currently.
50,000 shares a day.
Yep.
So, that's part of the problem with OTC stocks, small caps, right? You're not really a small cap. I mean, you're growing pretty quickly, right? But you're just not known. I think, and the challenge is, CNBC is not going to cover Volatus, right? They might get you on there for about a 10-second clip. I don't know what you're going to tell anybody in 10 seconds, but then you've got no analyst coverage, right, from the big funds, because they can't touch you yet. They've got covenants that won't even allow them to look at a stock that's under $1, trading under $5, right? And then you've got the paid promotional guys, which is tough because do they really like your company, or do they just like the fact that you cut them a check for 25 grand to cover the stock?
Yep.
Right. So it makes it very, very tough. And that's why we're doing this today, right? This is not a paid for promotion at all. I want to make sure everybody knows that. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling anybody to buy the stock. I'm just telling you, I just want to teach people what it is I do, right? And I have a very comprehensive review process. I do like to look at technicals. I do like to meet with management and get a feel, because here's the deal. You can have a fantastic product. You can have a great service. If you have a shitty leadership team, odds are stacked against you. And I'm sorry about using that word, but that's the most accurate. I mean, my feeling is if you do not have a seasoned, proven executive team, your odds are stacked against you, right? So that's why it's very important for me to meet with management. We met a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and in my head, you got it, Abby got it, and this is a fantastic story in a great industry that is I would say in its infancy stages. We're probably in what, inning 2, maybe at bottom of the first. I don't know.
I would say more bottom of the first, actually. I think it's got a long way to go yet. A lot of opportunity that hasn't been unleashed.
Right, but we're going there, and I think there's going to be more and more use cases as we move forward, right? So the one thing I really quickly wanted to bring up, biggest player is a Chinese player, right? In the drone space, owns about 70% of the market share globally, right?
That's correct.
Huge manufacturing capabilities. However, because of the fact that China is kind of backing Russia, right? And the other issues that we've had recently with little tiny chips that supposedly may be collecting data and being sent back to China, there could be a big shift right now in terms of market share as well, right?
Correct. So DJI is the company you're talking about, and they're the largest manufacturer in the world. We're a reseller for DJI. We're fairly large because the reality is their product is still in very high demand across Canada and across the United States into Latin America. They've got some very, very interesting products. We also expanded our offering significantly over the last couple of years to offer a lot of European, Israeli, and a lot of North American content. Some of our best public safety products, for example, are Berry compliant. They're made in America. One of the challenges that exists is obviously there's a big push to not buy from the Chinese manufacturers and buy from American. Unfortunately, the industry hasn't hit that capacity point right now where the North American OEMs can match the prices of the high volume Chinese production. So there's still a very high demand for the Chinese product. I think there's some interesting thing happen because American industrial machine is starting to really kick in high gear, and there are some really, really great products and talented OEMs. So I think as they build their capacities, they're going to gain more market share. But DJI is still a very large seller in Canada and the United States.
Okay. Glenn, this was an awesome, I think this was a fantastic interview, but I'm a little biased because I did it. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time and coming in. I personally think that, like, what's your risk reward on this potential opportunity, right? I look at this, you guys are financed. You don't need to do a cap raise anytime soon, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're fine from fueling our own growth. We're somewhat indefinite. Okay.
You've got some really exciting opportunities in front of you. You're new to the market, but you are not new to the market.
The gray hair kind of giving that away. Yeah.
You have an experienced team. You have a very sharp CFO, and I think you guys have great things ahead. And I think this is a real opportunity. Let me ask you, are you in a blackout period right now?
I'm almost always in a blackout period personally, because if I wasn't, I'd be buying my own stock. But yes, I am.
Okay. I think look, if you agree that the drone space is a space that is in its infancy stages, and there is going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity there, I think the risk reward on this stock is, I am a shareholder, by the way. I'm not in big. I never go in big, because for me, I start out small, and it's a matter of building trust, right? I need to see that management does what they say they're going to do. They execute, right? And that takes time. That doesn't happen in a week, right? That takes time. So I am in, and I actually have limit buys set to continue to add to my position. So it's not as though I'm not trying to build that position. I am. And I think if you're interested in the space and you're looking for a good management team that has a good product, I think you take a look at this and maybe dip your toe. That's just my opinion. Okay. All right, Glenn, thanks again for coming in. If there's anything I missed that you want to highlight, this is your shot. Okay.
You know what? It's been super exciting. It's been an honor to be here, Tim. And it's a really exciting time to be in the drone space. And I hope for those that don't decide to invest in us, that see your interview, they'll at least decide to watch us, because we got a lot of.
That's the key. That's what it's all about. Look, you don't want to buy it. That's fine. The market makes you scared right now. A lot of uncertainty. I get it. Put it on your watch list. Just keep an eye on it. Follow the story, right? And speaking of that, at some point, maybe a month, 2, I'd like to have a follow-up with you as well.
That would be a privilege. I'd love that.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording on this. Hang out for 1 second. Hey there, all you stock market junkies. Thanks for tuning in to yet another CEO interview here at Alpha Wolf Trading. Today we had Volatus Aerospace Corporation, ticker symbol VLTTF. And we had CEO Glen Lynch. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. Why not give us a share? And while you're at it, how about giving us a follow? Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Trading wishes you the very best of success.